Well, hello everybody. I am Eric Kaufmann. It is the morning of May 9th in a gloomy San Diego, but I love the occasional weather that we have down here. And thank you for joining me on this 40 minutes we're going to spend on the topic of sticky decisions. And for the record, please feel free to interact. You can ask questions in the Q&A panel. I'll try to get to them as we go through, but to be fair, I'm a really bad multitasker, so I'm going to focus on actually presenting the material. I'm going to go for 30 minutes, and then we have a 10-minute period there for Q&A, laser coaching, call it what you will. If I can't get to your answers or to your questions right in that 10 minutes, then I promise I'll email you afterwards with a full response to that. So decisions. They are the key to leadership. They are the key to life, quite frankly. In some traditions of personal growth, the very first thing that we have to learn in order to effectively evolve as a person, as a leader, as a manager, as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, is to make decisions. And so whether that's individually, on the team level, on an organizational level, on a global level, it's the key to what drives forward all of our life, is making a decision from point to point. And what I really want to focus on in the 30 minutes that we have here is not so much the individual decisions that we have to make, but more the team and the organization and how do we work effectively together in that way. A few decision examples, right? I decided to marry she wasn't my wife. I decided to marry my then girlfriend 3 months from the first date that we had. But for what it's worth, I've been deliberating on what new car to buy now for a year and a half. I was thinking about Peter. He decided that he wanted to divest the division of his company, so the team debated it, and they debated for 2 years before they made the decision to, in fact, divest that division. I was, again, in preparation. Mary is somebody I'd coached for a long time, and she had somebody who was underperforming for 5 years. It took her that long to come around to the decision to let this person go. And so not all decisions are the same, is what I'm trying to get at here. Not all decisions are equal. They are different in primarily 3 dimensions: urgency, in other words, what's the timeline we have going on here? Impact, what is the consequence of the decision? And complexity, what are all the different factors in that? And I want to talk to these as we go through this time here together. Every decision has consequence. You might be seeing this weird formula up here and wondering what it is. Every decision has consequence. And what all decisions have in common, regardless of where you're coming from, is this very strong, inescapable feature called uncertainty. And what we want to do inherently as people is that we want to protect ourselves from the consequences of making a wrong decision. That's really what gets so hung up and with so many people around the decision-making process, is that we want to avoid making the wrong decision. We don't want to be unhappy about the decision. We don't want to feel remorse, like we've done something wrong, or that we've hurt or alienated somebody else. We worry about feeling guilty. We could feel remiss that was the wrong direction, exposed, ignorant, let alone potential loss of money, loss of resources, loss of time. And so the decisions, they weigh heavily on us, but they are inescapable. They are necessary. And from a leadership perspective, this is where I spend my days in developing leaders and leadership teams. There is no leadership without decisions. Leadership fundamentally comes down to a series of decisions. What leaders do is make decisions, and they're varied with urgency, impact, and complexity. So this decision process, or decision, what I call sticky decision, is part of a productive collaboration program and offerings that we have here at Sagatica. The last webinar was on skillful conflict. Today we're talking about sticky decisions, and in particular I want to get into what are some of the barriers to making decisions and what are some of the best practices for making those decisions, and of course taking your questions. And the next webinar will be on useful meetings. I've always thought that was such a simple thing on one hand, and everybody gets energy around how do we have useful meetings? And then emotional commitment. What does it take to actually get engaged in an organization in order to find that sweet spot where they all meet and have this idea of productive collaboration? Real briefly then, why am I talking about sticky decisions? My work I define as combining an unrelenting focus on results with an unyielding respect for the human spirit. So both and. It's a decision I made a long time ago that I'm unwilling to negotiate away one or the other. So an unrelenting focus on results. We've got to do the things that will get things done. And it's an unyielding respect for the human spirit. We're human beings showing up in the workplace. And so we need to be able to respect that. Sorry, I'm trying to work this. Some of you raised a hand. I'm not entirely sure how to do this. So my Q&A panel is open. I know how to work that. So if you have a question or comments, please throw it in the Q&A. So the two ways that I work with folks: executive coaching, one-on-one, team facilitation, working with small teams or entire organizations, doing either facilitated pieces or actual training for the organization around leadership skills. Decisions is a real strong part of all that. A little bit about me. I learned a lot about decisions when I was a salesperson at 3M. I learned even more about decision when I went into marketing and marketing leadership and worked at Corning. I taught for 8 years a certificate program at San Diego State. It was a great program teaching professionals and managers how to effectively use coaching to be better managers. Some of my clients, Genentech, Verizon, Sony, SunPower, the list goes on. Wonderful, wonderful organizations to work with. I'm very excited that my most recent book, The 4 Virtues of a Leader, got tagged as top 10 books every small business owner should read, and every large business manager, I would argue. I worked as a certified clinical hypnotherapist, as a master scuba diving instructor, and I'm definitely influenced by a lifetime now, almost 30 years of Zen practice. So some of the influences on me and this notion of decision-making. So decision-making is what? It is a process. This is one of the most sort of critical things, I believe, that we need to consider in the decision-making discussion, is that it's not a moment. It's a process. It's a process of making a choice between a number of options. That's not where it ends, and committing to a future course of action. So it's a process of making a choice between a number of options and committing to a future course of action. And this is the first thing that I would like to share with you, is to deconstruct some of this notion of decision making, because people think it's just one singular experience. But in fact, there's an issue. There's an issue around wanting to divest, for example, a division of a company, or wanting to hire somebody, or to fire somebody, or wanting to craft a new strategy. Whatever the issue is, there's this sort of focusing process that goes on. So the front end of our process is investigation. The back end is execution, right? So that's what happens. There's something we need to understand. There's something we need to do. In between that, there are a couple of pieces, and they're not all what we call decision-making, even though it looks like a decision-making process. So the first part is research. Research is gathering and examining data, information, understanding, really going deep into what's happening in this relative to this issue or this process, right? The situation. The second part then is problem solving. Problem solving is understanding what we just researched and then trying to figure out how to identify what it is that we're trying to solve, right? Because perhaps you've had this experience in coaching, in facilitating groups. I would say fairly 8 out of 10 situations that we examine, what we think the issue is, upon closer examination, is not the actual issue. So I want to improve. I want to minimize the amount of mistakes that are happening in the manufacturing process. Well, that's the issue. But it turns out that the issue really has to do with the amount of sleep that our third shift is getting. And so the issue is not how to minimize, the issue is how to help them be more rested so they can make better decisions, literally, on the manufacturing floor. So there's problem-solving component that comes after the research. And then we get down to the actual decision-making. Decision-making then is again, it's narrowing down. So we're going to do a broad investigation. We're going to identify the problem and we're going to solve the problem, and then we're going to make a decision. And the decision is, it's cutting off the process. And after the decision comes the planning and then the execution. The reason I put this up here as the first slide is because, or right in the beginning, is because oftentimes the conversation collapses all these into one idea, as though decision-making is investigation, research, problem-solving, decision-making, planning, and execution. It lives in a particular place on the spectrum of what's happening as we flow along from understanding to execution and implementation. And not all decisions are the same, right? The impact and complexity is going to change the challenge of making the decision. It's going to change the amount of time we're going to spend on investigation and research. It's going to change the amount of effort we're going to put into the problem solving, the number of different options that we're going to look for. It's going to change the factors that we're going to consider when we're making a decision, let alone planning and execution implementation. What kind of cereal I'm going to eat this morning, because we have 3 or 4 cereals at home. That takes some brain power. Albert Einstein famously said that he only wore he had 7 versions of the same suit and same shirt, because he did not want to waste, in his words, he did not want to waste any time, any of his brain power deciding what to wear. He wanted to focus on the bigger problems of life. So what kind of cereal is one level, right? What kind of car to buy is another. Do I get this promotion? Do I want this promotion? Do I give this promotion? That's a more impact, more complexity. Do I hire somebody? Do I fire somebody? What strategy do we take? Do we invest hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, millions of dollars? Not all decisions are the same, and to pretend that they are doesn't do us much favor. So I want to get into what are some of the barriers. What are some of the barriers that hold us up from the decision-making process? There are personal barriers, what's happening in my head and in my heart. There are team barriers, what's going on dynamically between people. And then there are systemic barriers that has to do with the culture, the environment, the way business is conducted in your team and in your organization. And each one of them has an impact. So I want to talk briefly about the personal one. And I think the biggest barrier on the personal front is fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of making a mistake. And I identify 3 core fears. I talk about this in great length in my book, The 4 Virtues of a Leader. I talk about this in great length in the programs that we do on awakening managerial courage. But the 3 fears that govern us more often than not, that have variations on themes, is the fear of failure. I'm just not going to be able to get this right. The fear of rejection. If I get this wrong and make a mistake, if this doesn't work out, if unintended consequences are too great, I'm going to be kicked out of the tribe, the team, I'm going to be in the out group. And the fear of humiliation. I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm going to feel worthless or unworthy. So the fear of failure, again, I don't want to feel powerless. I don't want to feel unloved in case of rejection. I don't want to feel unworthy. And so it takes courage to make a decision. In particular, the 3 types of courage that align with these 3 types of fears. The courage to commit. It takes courage to commit, because you can analyze up, down, and sideways. Remember that very first formula? Uncertainty. It is the name of life. It is fraught with uncertainty. And you know what? You can't predict the good things that will come out of it, and you can't predict the bad things out of it. But you've got to have a courage to commit, because without commitment, there's no decision. There's got to be a courage to care. The courage to care is this interpersonal, this human virtue of warmth and empathy and kindness and connectedness. By the way, these are really important things when you want to have a high-functioning team. Not just competition and drive and ambition and innovation, but care, human contact. And of course, the courage to speak up. Because if you don't speak up, then what has been missed in the decision investigation, in the problem solving, in the whole process of making a decision if you don't speak up? So there is that element of the personal side, the fear you have to contend with, that's one of the barriers. There's another barrier, and that's the barrier of human psychology, the way teams and people work together. And in particular, I want to talk about these 4 barriers that keep showing up. So one is what's called the confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is basically when the decision-making team has already decided on what they want based on the previously held belief. You know who did a fantastic job of tuning into the confirmation bias was IBM. Way back in the day, I think it was the 70s or the 80s, they came up with this marketing campaign that basically says nobody got fired for choosing an IBM. Freaking brilliant, quite frankly. What they did is they said that, you know, you can't go wrong, or on a team, you know, John can do no wrong. He's the go-getter. And what happens with the confirmation bias is that we are looking to confirm what we already know. Now you can see from a decision-making process that's very tricky, because what the human mind, with the psychology of a human being individually and in a team, what we want to do is mitigate, minimize uncertainty. And if we know that something works, then we just do it again, right? It worked in the past, it'll work in the future. We know it's going to work, so I'm going to look for evidence that it works. I went to hire somebody. There were red flags. People were telling me to pay a little more attention, but I already decided that I wanted to hire this person, and I was only looking for the evidence that would confirm this was the right thing. I screwed up. It was a big mistake. It was a big mistake for me personally. It was a big mistake for the team, and we do this individually, and we do this collectively. So confirmation bias is one. There's another one called anchoring. Anchoring is this, again, it's a mental trap, as it were, that we over-rely on a piece of information or an experience, and then we anchor and compare everything else to that experience. So, as a team, we've always had success with this particular approach to strategy. So we're anchoring, you know, we have an ABC strategy method. Now the fact is our strategy now is not really effective. Our goals aren't really compelling and people aren't engaged. So we need to change the way we're doing our strategy. That's not unusual. That's not unusual. That's a healthy thing to do. But we compare all the other strategy processes to our ABC model and find fault in them, because they're just not the anchor. They're not the reference point that we have. So watch out for that. I mean, open-mindedness is what's required as that front end of making effective decisions. The halo effect, I'm sure you guys have heard of. The halo effect is kind of transmitting positive features onto a person or a situation or a product or a process because you've had good affiliation with it. So, you know, marketers use it very effectively. So when we see Serena Williams, or we see Michael Jordan as advertising for Nike, we automatically think Michael Jordan was so fantastic. Nike is fantastic. In a decision making, we've got to look for that. We're actually looking at the right data in the right way with the right kind of angle of investigation. So, it's not entirely accurate that a great successful person in one domain can be a great successful person, and the same person can be successful in the second domain. Michael Jordan, for example, the star of basketball, didn't do that well as a baseball player. You'd think an athlete's an athlete's an athlete, but it ain't the case. The halo effect you've got to really watch out for, because what you're trying to do again is we're trying to mitigate uncertainty. And so if someone has been, or some process or some product has been successful in one place, well, it's obvious they'll be successful in this place. And so you make a decision based not on the data, not on the situation, not on the conditions, not on your need, not on your team, not on your budget, but on the effort to reduce this anxiety. And the third one is overconfidence bias. This runs into this really fascinating research on what happens as people rise up in an organization and as people become more powerful and more prominent and have more authority, is that they begin to believe that they are more capable and competent than perhaps they really are. Why do they believe that? Well, because they've been promoted. The evidence is in their experience. And teams that do really well run into this in the same way, become overconfident, certain of your ability. So humility, curiosity, those are powerful, powerful tools for a team to make more effective decisions. So I talked a little bit about the personal barrier. I talked a little bit about the team dynamic, particularly as it relates to some of these psychological barriers. And I want to talk in this third one around systemic or culture, because that's huge. We often underplay the impact, the importance, and the contribution of culture on decision making. So real briefly, one of the things that my team and I do when we go and work with an organization is understand what type of culture is prevalent in that organization, because culture, who was it? I think it was Peter Drucker that said culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats everything for breakfast. Culture is the underlying, culture is water to the fish, it's air to the bird, it is the inherent environment within which everything else makes sense, including decision making. And so I'm going to make this super brief, 2 minutes or so. There are two dimensions that we look at when we look at culture, right? One dimension has to do with the dimension of formality. And so flexibility is one end, so you're flexible, there's individual discretion for people to do and think and choose and make decisions on their own. There's a lot of dynamic exchange between people. On the other side of that is there's an organization that's much more stable, where conformity and order and process and control. So those are the two dynamic pairs. And the other set of tensions is between where organizations place their focus. So do they look outwardly and they try to be different? It's market oriented, they're driven to rivalry and competitiveness, or do they look inwardly where the focus is on integration and unity and teamwork of various kinds? And so they produce these 4 different types of basic cultures, and there's a lot of really interesting research on culture. Again, I'm not going to make this a webinar on culture, but it's important in the decision process because it affects everything. So in a collaborative, what we call the clan culture, it's open and friendly, it's an extended family, the leaders are mentors, there's a tremendous focus on teamwork and consensus. Teamwork and consensus. That's going to be a very different way of going about the decision process than the creative cultures, right? What they call the adhocracy, where it's about entrepreneurialism, it's about drive, it's about achievement and individual freedom, individual initiative are a big deal. Right away, you see, and I have a great example of this in the client that I'm coaching right now. He's the CFO of a company. He came from one culture where he was a star CFO. He is now the CFO in this new company with a very different culture. He literally came from an adhocracy culture where he had independence and freedom to make all his own decisions into this really well-functioning clan culture that has a huge emphasis on collaboration, on consensus, on teamwork. And he is struggling mightily. Not for lack of intelligence, not for lack of ability, not for lack of experience, not for lack of empathy, but because the culture in which he's working is so different that the decision-making process is completely different than where he came from. The control, the hierarchy culture, there's predictability, security. Decisions are going to be affected by what? Don't rock the boat, don't mess up, don't ruin anything, keep things going as they are. And then there's this competitive, this market-focused culture. And you can see what's going to happen there is it's all about market share. What can we do to drive market share? What can we do at Wells Fargo to do everything to open accounts, to make more money? It doesn't matter how we decide on what's right or wrong. What's driving us is the market. This is really important. It seems tangential in a way, but you can deal with your personal stuff. You can deal with the team stuff. The culture dynamic is so powerful that if you ignore that, you're going to absolutely have ineffective decision process. And if you are trying to change the culture, or if you feel like the culture is a culture that's different than your inherent values, you're going to struggle inside that space to make decisions effectively and to be seen as a good decision maker. So in the remaining time, I want to talk a little bit about best practices. And I'll be happy to send the information to you. There's a lot packed in here. One best practice is to recognize what is your style of decision making, right? So again, personal, team, and organizational. One, and it might just be easier to email this to you or to send this out, but there's these sort of 6 styles, right? The agony style, I'm going to think it over and over to death. The impulse style, hey, I'm going to do it now. The escape style, I'm just going to avoid it and put it off. The compliance style, let someone else do it because it's too stressful for me to think about it. Play it safe, And then, of course, the procrastination style, which is, as far as I'm concerned, not a style. It's just, you know, it's a decision not to make a decision, which I guess is a decision in its own right, and usually a poor one. And so you can see these styles are both personal, but also organizational. So a compliance style and a control culture would work well, right? Because control stability and firmness is important. An agony style could actually work well in a clan culture, because you've got to really include as many people as possible. But get a sense of what is your style and when is it appropriate and when is it inappropriate. And know that it's not one style, by the way. I've agonized over some decisions and been very impulsive about others. I proposed to who is now my wife, in 90 days from meeting her. That was fairly impulsive. And actually, you know, I went away, after 90 days of dating, I went away on a camping trip with a friend of mine. And on that camping trip, I told him, you know, I don't feel like I miss her at all. And he looked at me and he said, well, what the hell are you telling me this? I said, I don't feel like I miss her because I don't feel like I'm apart from her. I kind of reflected and thought, wow, I feel that connected to her. I should probably propose to her. I flew back, went from the airport to her apartment, knocked on the door, and proposed to her right then. At which point she said yes, and then she said, well, shouldn't there be a ring? And I go, oh, a ring. It's truly impulsive. I didn't think about it. So what is your style? When is it appropriate? We've been married 18 years for what it's worth, and I'm totally, totally supportive, delighted, and grateful for the decision that I made and the decision that she made in response. So the other component to consider is, I remember I talked about urgency, impact, and complexity. There's some wonderful research, and you're welcome to sort of look this up yourself. David Snowden and Mary Boone wrote a work on a leader's framework for decision making, where they distinguish between an ordered type of decision to an unordered, and the middle is disorder. So the reason I bring it up is because a simple decision is cause and effect. It's black and white, right? My car won't start. I need a new battery. Done. You know, the license ran out on the software. We need to upgrade the software. Done. Those are really simple decisions. So what you do is, you know, the sensing component of actually research is very brief. You categorize what type of problem this is, and you respond. You take action. Then there's a complicated decisions, and the complicated decisions or contexts have multiple right answer. So it's not A or B, it's A or B or C or D, and either one of them could have a positive outcome, right? Could be the right answer, but it's not obvious which one is the right answer. So that's complicated. So what you do in that case is you sense. In other words, first you identify, you do the research, but then instead of going to categorize and say it's this or that, you analyze, you gather you spend way more time in that research and problem solving piece before you go to the decision making. Remember in that hourglass shape that I had, it's investigation, research, problem solving. The complicated is going to spend more time in research and problem solving, and then you respond. And then of course there's the complex. And the complex, there's not only A or B or C or D, but it's not obvious which is the right answer. It's not at all obvious which is the right answer. I could be down to, you know, 3 or 4 candidates, and it's complex, right? So what I need to do is spend more time investigating and probing, understanding it before I respond. And then of course there's the chaotic. The chaotic is there's no real answer. You know, there are unknown unknowns that are so great that the best I could do is take some action now and know that I'll correct as I go along. So I'm going to take some action, and I'm going to continue to investigate, and I'm going to continue to refine what I do. It's important because not all decisions are the same. For those of you who are into Myers-Briggs or personality types, know that there's another really interesting best practice. If you haven't looked it up, this is great stuff called the Z model. And the Z model basically follows the Myers-Briggs types, or the Myers-Briggs dynamic pairs, and saying that when you go through a decision process, first is look at the facts and details. This is not unlike, again, that hourglass piece that I showed you, right? So it's the sensing component first. What's going on? What are the facts? What's actually happening? Trying to avoid the halo effect, trying to avoid the anchoring effect. Then you go into possibilities. So if these are the facts, use your intuition to say what's possible, what's in my imagination. Can we brainstorm? Can we consider various solutions? That's the problem solving in multiple parts. Then we go from sensing, intuiting, to thinking. The thinking component says, well, again, these are the possibilities at a high level, but what's the consequence of each one of these decisions? If I wasn't involved, if I wasn't personally involved, what would I suggest for people to do? Again, what is the cause and effect of these actions? And finally, we go into the feeling side, the impact. What impact will this decision have on those people who are involved? Is it something I can live with? Is it something in my values, in my integrity? What else is going on that I ought to be considering as far as impact? So it's a wonderful, accessible, easy process for making a decision, counterbalanced, as it were, by a far more calculated process. So there's a decision-making matrix. If you're really trying to figure out what to do among multiple options, you can think of, the various, so for example, I have here functionality, fit for purpose, stability of vendor, price value. I'm trying to determine which of these companies to go with. And so I have solution 1, solution 2, solution 3. Those are the different vendors. I have the elements that are important to me in the decision process. I have the sub-elements in each one of them, and I basically give them weighting. This, I can, again, send you this as an actual, it's a spreadsheet. And then when I enter all the numbers, boop, there it is. 69.66 got the highest one. So solution 1, vendor 1 is the one I'm going to go with because it makes the most sense. So this is one way to cut out the uncertainty. Again, uncertainty is the name of the game that we're trying to deal with here. So in wrapping this up, and I want to have time here for questions. If there are questions, there's a process you're going through, right? The decision-making process is first clarify the boundaries of the decision. You can't boil the ocean. You got to figure out what it is specifically that you're working on. Can you name the issue? Can you name the problem? Can you name the challenge specifically? Then there it is. You gather information, whether it's impulsive, it's a little bit of gathering, or whether it's agonizing, it's a lot of information. But at some level, you've got to get informed about what's going on. And you're going to have to determine who has the decision rights. I have seen teams fall apart. I've seen organizations underperform because internally there was no real effective way to determine the decision rights. Who has the decision? And within your culture, how does that work? Because a clan culture and a market culture and an adhocracy culture, they each have a different one. So who has the decision rights? How are you going to decide? Actually, that one is, what's the criteria for your decision? How do you generate alternatives? How do you discuss the alternatives? How do you identify the pros and cons? How do you decide using the idea? That's your decide how to decide. And then when you're done, summarize the rationale. How did you get to this decision? And then communicate the decision. These last two boxes here on the bottom left are super critical because the people who are engaged in the decision are engaged in it intensely. And the people often who are impacted by the decision don't understand how it came about. And there's a big gap. And that gap can often cause to a lack of effective execution. So once you've gone through all this great effort of actually making the decision, be sure to communicate it. Be sure to effectively transmit it out to the folks around you so that they know how you came about to it. So I wanted to talk about sticky decisions. These are decisions that stick. And get into, I talked about the barriers, I talked about some best practices. I know there's some questions. Let me see if I can get to them. So thanks for tuning in. Can you decide to be committed? Isn't commitment a symptom of choice, will, certainty? Can you decide to be committed? That's a great question. Can you decide to be committed? I believe so. I believe that some level of commitment is a decision. So I'll use a really personal example. I talked about my wife. I'm committed to our marriage. There's some days when it's easier than others. I'm not letting out any big secret. I mean, anyone who's been in any relationship for a while knows the challenge. But I've decided I'm committed, which means that it's not just choice or will or certainty. It's exactly in the absence sometimes of certainty that the decision to be committed is the power. Because if certainty was there, I wouldn't have to decide anything. I would just flow with it, right? And will is another great question, because my willpower waxes and wanes. My motivation waxes and wanes. For 17 years now, I've been running a shop, a consulting business. I can assure you that not every day is fantastic, and not every project is awesome, and not every aspect of business is something that I love. But I'm committed. I decide to be committed. And if I only did it when I was motivated, I'd work like, I don't know, 46% of the time. Because slightly above the majority of the time, I'm deciding to commit. So, in my opinion, yes, you can decide to be committed. And you've got to look at circumstances. You've got to look at the relationship. You've got to look at the environment. You've got to look at the culture. Does it fit? But I believe that at some level, commitment is a decision, and decision is a commitment. So that's a really thought-provoking question, and I think one that deserves investigation. And actually, again, and I published my book, The Four Virtues of the Hero. No, The Four Virtues of a Leader. The third section is called Grit, which is passion and perseverance towards long-term objectives and goals. Grit is really about this idea of deciding and committing. It's sticking with it even when you don't feel like it. So thank you for that, Myron. Santiago has got a question around, how do you avoid cognitive dissonance with sticky decisions? Or how do you manage it? Cognitive dissonance, meaning, I assume, my understanding of cognitive dissonance is literally being of two minds, right? Of two minds, like there's a part of me that wants to do it, there's a part of me that doesn't want to do it. And so, again, avoiding cognitive dissonance is something that I'm not real clear on, because I can't avoid it in my own life. It's part of my experience. And I love this term that I learned from one of my teachers, Elizabeth Hamilton. She talked about the many me's. The many me's. The many me's are, so for example, there's a function coming up, a business function coming up, and there's a part of me that's really excited to go to this function because there's really good people there, there's good information, there's some wonderful relationships in there. And there's a part of me that's really not into going because I'm an introvert, and quite frankly, going to a two-day function is exhausting. So there's some dissonance there for me, right? There's a pull-push, the desire to go and the desire not to go. How do you avoid cognitive dissonance with sticky decisions? I think your second part, how do you manage it? What you've got to bring to the table is a greater sense of awareness. What are the different factors and features? What are the different components? What are the different parts of me? What are the different parts of the culture that are affecting this? And so I think you manage it by raising awareness, by raising your consciousness, by giving name, labeling, actually annotating the dissonance that's within you, because that is data. Remember on that going from the sensing to the intuiting, that's part of the data of your decision making, the cognitive dissonance. Why am I conflicted about this? Why am I challenged by this? What is it about this situation, this person, this condition, this brand, this project, this product, this decision that has me split and fighting internally? That's data. If you ignore it, you ignore it at your own peril. I ignored the data that this person I hired was not a good fit because I really over-indexed the value of what I thought, the halo effect. I completely fell for the halo effect of this person. And I ignored my own internal dissonance to my judgment. So how do you avoid it? I don't know. How do you manage it? With increased awareness. I hope that helps, Santiago. And I have time to read one last one here from Steve. He says, how do you balance the results orientation in just get it done cultures that do not take into consideration the human and collaborative spirit? How do you ensure sound decision making and speed with low investigation and research orientation? Wow, that is such a powerful question, Steve. So a couple things come to mind. One, fit. Right? I talked about these different cultures. We looked at the, I looked at those 4 different cultures, right? And if you're in a culture that is high-paced, detached, the market-driven, the competitive type culture, where this idea of actually considering the collaborative spirit, which is more of the clan culture, is not working, then it's not a good fit for you. Or for somebody else. I don't know about your particular circumstance. But the best, I bring out the best in myself when the environment is one that coincides with my values and style. I bring the best contribution when I'm able to really fit in, and when I don't fit in, it's constantly this struggle, this friction, there's drag, there's tension internally and even externally. And to your question about how do you ensure sound decision making and speed with low investigation and resource orientation, I don't know how you do that, because I don't see how low investigation and research orientation enables you to make good decisions. Good decision meaning that you've considered the various options, possibilities, consequences, and are doing the appropriate actions to move the organization forward. There's this fantastic article in the Harvard Business Review from a couple of years ago that was labeled slowing down in order to speed up. And they show that the organizations that slow down, in other words, they do just what you said, the investigation, the research, they think about it, they reflect it, those organizations outperform their competitors by, it was 40% improved productivity and 50% improved profitability. So to the question of how do you ensure sound decision-making, I don't think you can make sound decision-making. I think what happens is they make decisions quickly, they make decisions with the data they have at hand, and there's probably a constant flow of fixing, correcting, adjusting, and adapting. And maybe in that culture, that's perfect. But it has its limitations for sure. So, as advertised, I was gonna spend 40 minutes, and looking at my clock, it's now 41 minutes into the process. So I am thrilled that I got to share some of these insights and tools on decision making. I love that you asked questions, and I'm grateful that I had the chance to respond to your questions. Upcoming is the next webinar will be, let me see if I can make this work. The next webinar is on useful meetings, and that'll be September 19th at 11 Pacific. Useful meetings, how not to die in meetings, or worse off, kill the souls of the people with whom you're meeting. What makes a meeting effective? How do you get the most out of people coming together to drive the organization forward? And obviously, if I can be a resource to you, if my team can be a resource to you for individual coaching, for team facilitation, for leadership training, I would love to do that. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I get excited about. This is what I've been doing for 17 years, developing leadership and particularly developing executive wisdom. Decisions are a feature of wisdom, and that can be cultivated and developed. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And I wish you great good fortune on making decisions and not being afraid to be wrong. It's just part of the process. Good luck on the journey.